I stared at my phone, the screen burning my eyes more than the midday sun outside. The words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. "You are not invited to your grandson's birthday. We thought it would be better this way." My chest tightened, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I sat down on the edge of the worn leather couch, hands trembling, the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic blending into a dull roar. I could feel the cold tile under my bare feet, the lingering smell of last night's burnt coffee. The house seemed quieter, emptier than usual, as if it was mocking me. I ran my fingers over the screen again, as if touching it could erase the words, or at least soften them. But the message stayed. I remembered the little boy's laughter, his sticky fingers in mine last Christmas, the way he used to call me Papa, like it meant the world. And now, this silence, this deliberate absence. The hurt wasn't just emotional, it was physical, a tight knot pressing against my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I rubbed my face, closing my eyes, trying to summon some clarity. Anger bubbled under the surface, raw and hot, but underneath it was a quieter, sharper pain. Rejection. Not from strangers, not from people who barely knew me, from my own blood. And yet, as the initial shock faded into a slow, burning ache, a stubborn thought surfaced. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. My grandson would know me. Somehow. I just needed a way back in. The next morning I woke up to the dull ache of sleeplessness, my head pounding like a drumbeat in a silent house. I could still feel the weight of that message pressing against my chest. I brewed coffee slowly, the rich, bitter aroma filling the kitchen, trying to anchor myself. Every sip was a reminder that life kept moving, whether I was included in it or not. I pulled out an old photo album from the shelf, dust motes dancing in the morning light. There he was, my grandson, grinning with missing teeth, his tiny hands clutching a toy truck. I traced the pictures with my finger, feeling the warmth of memory and the sting of absence all at once. Each photo whispered a promise I hadn't broken. I would be there for him no matter what. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg or argue. I would find a way to show him I mattered. Maybe through small gestures, little surprises, or quiet messages that reminded him I was still his grandfather. Not loud, not confrontational, but present, always present. I felt a spark in the pit of my stomach, something I hadn't felt since I was a kid myself, something fierce. It was the stubbornness of a man who refuses to vanish from the life of someone he loves. And in that spark, I realized this wasn't just about a birthday. It was about respect, connection, and legacy. I set the album down, poured another cup of coffee, and whispered to the empty kitchen, "You're not getting rid of me that easy." That afternoon I drove to the park where I knew my grandson loved to play. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of cut grass and hot pretzels from a nearby stand. I stayed on the fringes, watching him from a distance. His laughter rang out, high and pure, and my chest ached with both joy and sorrow. I wanted to walk over, scoop him up, tell him I loved him, but something held me back. My son's words echoed in my mind. We thought it would be better this way. I couldn't intrude, couldn't break his carefully drawn boundary. So I did the next best thing. I took out my phone and recorded a short video, my voice steady even though my hands shook. "Hey buddy, I know I'm not there today, but I'm thinking of you. I hope your day is full of laughter and cake and everything you love. Can't wait to see you soon. Love, Papa." I sent it without expecting a reply. It felt small, almost insignificant, but as I put my phone away I noticed something. A man sitting nearby had been watching me, nodding, a quiet acknowledgement that maybe I was doing the right thing. That small recognition gave me a flicker of courage. I stayed a little longer, just breathing in the sound of children playing, letting it wash over me. I wasn't invited, yes, but I was still part of this world, still connected to him in ways that didn't need permission. And somewhere deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. That evening, I sat on the porch, the fading light casting long shadows across the yard. The sky was a mix of bruised purples and deep oranges, like it knew the mood I carried with me. The air smelled faintly of burning leaves from a neighbor's fire pit, a comforting reminder that life kept moving even when I felt stuck. My phone buzzed. I jumped slightly, heart thudding, hoping, no, expecting, a message from my son, or maybe even a picture of my grandson. But it wasn't that. Just a notification about bills, just the ordinary world, moving on without me. I stared at the screen, tasting frustration as bitter as the last sip of cheap whiskey I'd had months ago. I clenched my fists, feeling the ache in my chest tighten. A part of me wanted to type back, to demand an explanation, to let all my hurt spill out in words that might shatter more than they healed, but I didn't. I didn't because I knew that anger wouldn't help, wouldn't reach my grandson's heart. It would only push him further away. So I let it go, slowly, deliberately. I took a deep breath, the crisp evening air filling my lungs and carrying a strange kind of peace. I poured myself a glass of cold water from the kitchen, letting the chill slide down my throat, sharp and grounding. I whispered to the quiet yard, I'm not giving up on him. Not my son, him, my grandson. The small boy whose laughter still echoed in my memory, whose sticky fingers I could feel even now. Whoever tried to keep us apart didn't understand one thing. Love like this doesn't follow rules or schedules. It doesn't wait for permission. I sat there until darkness fell, until the streetlights flickered on and the first stars appeared. I didn't have answers yet. I didn't know how I'd get back into their lives, how I'd reach him without breaking everything, but I felt something else. A stubborn pulse of determination. And that, I realized, was enough for tonight. The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. I sat at the kitchen table nursing a cup of black coffee, staring out at the street where kids' bicycles leaned against driveways and sprinklers sprayed arcs of water into the bright air. Life was moving around me, relentless and indifferent, and I felt like an outsider looking in. I thought about my grandson, how he used to run into my arms, how his tiny hands had once wrapped around my fingers like they belonged there. I wondered if he remembered, or if the absence of my presence had begun to blur those memories. The idea of being forgotten, even in small ways, made my stomach twist. I knew I had to act, but not with anger, not with bitterness. That only pushed people away. No, this had to be careful, quiet, strategic. I needed him to see me, to feel me, without anyone else deciding it was better this way. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down small plans, little ways to show up in his life without breaking the boundaries my son had set. A postcard with a funny drawing, a short video reading a story, a small gift left at the doorstep with a note, thinking of you. Love, Papa. Each idea carried a mix of hope and fear, but it sparked something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of agency. By mid-morning, I was dressed and walking to the corner store. The air smelled like freshly cut grass and asphalt warmed by the sun. I bought a small box of crayons, a notebook, and a toy truck I thought he'd like. I imagined him opening it, the surprise lighting up his face, the giggle I'd been missing. The thought filled me with warmth, but also a sting, the reminder that this joy wouldn't be shared immediately, that it would have to sneak its way into his day through subtle channels. When I walked home, the package secure in my bag, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I couldn't control his father, couldn't control the exclusion, but I could control this. And for now, that was enough. I placed the items on my desk and stared at them, imagining his little hands touching them, imagining his laugh bouncing through the house as if I were there. I whispered to the empty room, "We'll get there. Somehow, we'll get there." That evening I decided to drive past my son's neighborhood, careful not to intrude but wanting to feel close to him and my grandson. The streets were lined with oaks and maples, their leaves whispering in the breeze, and the sun hung low, casting golden halos around everything. I stayed in my car, windows cracked, just watching the life that was both mine and not mine anymore. I saw him, the little boy, riding his bike up and down the driveway, helmet slightly askew, giggling at nothing in particular. My chest tightened so sharply I thought I might choke. The sight of him, so full of energy, reminded me of every missed birthday, every scraped knee I hadn't kissed better, every bedtime story I hadn't read. And yet, it also reminded me why I couldn't give up. I sat there for nearly an hour, silently cheering him on, talking to myself in whispers only the wind could carry. "You're stronger than this," I told him without words. "I'm still here. I'll find my way back." My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles were white, and the tension in my shoulders reminded me that love sometimes came with weight. On the drive home, I thought about the subtle ways I could make my presence felt without crossing lines. A small note tucked into his backpack, a drawing slipped under the door, a phone call read aloud just for him. Each idea carried a mix of hope and fear. Would it work? Would he even notice? Would my son see it as interference? I pulled into my driveway, the engine humming to a stop, and sat there for a long moment. The dusk air was cool against my skin, carrying the faint scent of someone grilling dinner a few houses down. I closed my eyes and imagined my grandson's laugh, the way it used to bounce around my living room. That memory, sharp and vivid, ignited a stubborn spark. It was more than just stubbornness. It was survival. Not my survival, not really, but his. A man protects what matters to him, even when the rules change, even when the path is blocked. I realized then that I didn't just want to be there for him. I had to be. By the time I stepped inside, the sky had darkened completely. I placed my keys on the counter, poured a glass of water, and let out a long breath. The house was quiet, yes, but it wasn't empty. Not entirely. Because even though I wasn't invited, a part of me, his part, our part, still existed here, still alive, and I promised myself. No silence, no distance, no barrier could erase that. I woke the next morning before sunrise, the house still steeped in darkness. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, but my mind was anything but quiet. Thoughts of my grandson circled endlessly, each one sharper than the last, mixing nostalgia with the sting of exclusion. I could almost hear his small laugh echoing through the empty rooms, a ghost of memories I refused to let fade. I made coffee, the rich, bitter aroma filling the kitchen, and sat at the table with my notebook. I wrote down every memory I could think of, how he used to crawl into my lap during cartoons, the way he would insist I read his favorite books over and over, how he once fell asleep with my hand resting on his tiny shoulder. The memories burned bright, painful and beautiful at the same time, a reminder of what was at stake. And then I wrote a plan, not just a small gesture or a note, but a series of small, deliberate steps to reclaim my presence in his life. I would start with subtle reminders, tiny moments that told him, "I'm here, I love you, you belong to me, and I belong to you." A postcard with a joke only he would understand. A drawing of our favorite superhero together. A small toy truck left at his doorstep with a note in my handwriting. Each item would be a thread, weaving a connection invisible to anyone else but him. By mid-morning, I was dressed and walking to the local store. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves and freshly cut grass, and each step felt like a tiny reclaiming of the world I had lost. I picked out a small box of crayons, a notebook with a cartoon on the cover, and a miniature truck that reminded me of him instantly. I cradled the items in my arms as if holding pieces of his soul. On the way back, I stopped by the park where I knew he often played. From a distance, I watched him ride his bike, the helmet slightly crooked, the wind tangling his hair. His laughter rang out, pure and unguarded, and my chest ached in a way that words could never describe. I wanted to step forward, to scoop him up, to tell him everything I couldn't say in words, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I took a deep breath, tucked the packages safely in my bag, and whispered to myself, "Soon, soon you'll know I never left." Back home, I spread everything out on my desk, arranging the items as though they were pieces of a puzzle only he could complete. I imagined him discovering each one, his small hands brushing against my handwriting, his eyes lighting up with recognition. I pictured his giggle echoing through my living room, a sound that belonged to both of us, that no one could take away. Hours passed as I crafted a small letter to go with the package, every word carefully chosen to convey love, patience, and presence, without overstepping. "I'm thinking of you," I wrote. "I hope you enjoy this little surprise. I love you, always." I read it aloud, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat, and set it aside to rest. As dusk fell, I realized that the act of preparing, of imagining his joy, had transformed the anger and hurt into something else, something alive. I wasn't just waiting for an invitation. I was creating my own path back into his life, one deliberate, patient step at a time. The house was quiet, the shadows long and soft, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control, of purpose. I poured a glass of water, staring out the window at the fading light, and whispered to the empty room, "We'll find each other again. I promise." And in that quiet, resolute moment, I knew that no message, no exclusion, could erase the bond we shared. Not if I refused to let it. The night after preparing the package, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the house pressing down on me. Each creak in the floor, each faint hum of the refrigerator, reminded me that I was alone, but also that I had time. Time to act, to plan, to fight quietly and patiently for my grandson. My mind replayed that message over and over. "You are not invited to your grandson's birthday. We thought it would be better this way." The words stung, sharp as a blade, and yet they fueled a fire inside me I hadn't felt in years. I rolled out of bed, bare feet on the cold hardwood, and made my way to the kitchen. The night was still, the world outside muted and shadowed. I brewed coffee, the bitter smell filling the air, grounding me. I sat at the table, my notebook open, and began to map out everything I could do to reclaim a place in my grandson's life. It wasn't about defiance or confrontation. It was about presence, about showing up even when the doors were closed. I listed ideas, small, deliberate actions that could reach him without overstepping my son's boundaries. Leave a note on his favorite swing in the park, send a postcard with a silly drawing, record a short video reading a story he loved, something I could send without demanding attention. Each idea was a thread, fragile and subtle, but each thread would weave a connection that no one could erase. I paused after writing each one, imagining his small hands discovering the gestures, imagining his eyes lighting up in recognition, imagining his laughter echoing in my mind. By the time dawn began to creep in through the blinds, I was dressed and out the door. The streets were quiet, bathed in the soft golden light of early morning. I walked with purpose, carrying the small box of items I had bought the day before. Crayons, a notebook, a miniature toy truck. Each item felt heavy with meaning, a tangible representation of my love and determination. I imagined him opening the package, touching each object, feeling me there even if I wasn't physically present. I stopped at the corner store to grab some envelopes and stamps. The clerk, an older man who knew me by sight, greeted me with a nod. I smiled faintly, thinking about how the ordinary world continued without interruption, how life carried on even when it excluded you. It was comforting and infuriating at the same time. I bought the supplies, paid, and walked back home, my thoughts running ahead to the ways I would deliver my small gifts. Once inside, I spread everything across the dining table, arranging it carefully. I wrote a short letter to my grandson, each word deliberate, each sentence crafted to convey love without intrusion. "I hope this little surprise makes you smile. I'm thinking of you and can't wait to see you soon. Love, Papa." I read it aloud, the sound of my own voice reverberating in the quiet house, and felt a strange mix of sorrow and hope. Sorrow for the moments I had already missed, hope for the ones I could still reach. I decided to take a walk to the park where he often played, carrying the package with me. I stayed at the edges, unseen, watching him ride his bike with the reckless joy of childhood. His helmet was slightly crooked, his hair messy in the wind, and his laughter pierced my chest in a way that made it ache with longing. I wanted to run to him, scoop him up, tell him everything I couldn't express in words, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I whispered under my breath, "I'm here. Always." After a long while, I returned home exhausted but strangely energized. I placed the package carefully on my desk, imagining him discovering it, imagining the small thrill of recognition, imagining the unspoken bond that would flicker to life again. The house was quiet, the sun creeping higher in the sky, and for the first time in days, I felt a measure of control. I couldn't control my son or his decisions, But I could control my actions. I could create moments, however small, that reminded my grandson I existed, I cared, and I loved him fiercely. Over the next few days, I put the plan into motion. I left a small drawing of a superhero in the mailbox, with my handwriting scrawled across the bottom. Just for you. Love, Papa. I recorded a short video reading a story about a brave little boy who overcame impossible odds, sending it to a secure family app where I knew he would see it. Each act was quiet, subtle, but filled with intention. And each time I imagined him smiling, my heart expanded in a way that made the sting of exclusion bearable. One evening, as I sat on the porch, the air thick with the scent of rain and wet earth, I heard a sound that made my chest tighten. Laughter. Not from the street, not from a television, but the exact timbre of my grandson's giggle echoing somewhere close. My stomach lurched with anticipation and fear. I wasn't sure if it was him, or if my mind was playing tricks. But I allowed myself the hope that my small, deliberate gestures were working, that even without my son's approval, my presence was reaching him. I spent hours that night drafting ideas for more ways to connect, small acts of creativity, of presence, of love that didn't rely on permission. I drew sketches, wrote letters, and imagined conversations where he would tell me about his day, his thoughts, his fears. I imagined holding him close, feeling the weight of his small body against mine, whispering reassurances I hoped would stay with him forever. The weight of the situation was immense, but it no longer crushed me. It propelled me. Each exclusion, each silent boundary, became fuel for my determination. I wasn't passive anymore. I wasn't waiting to be invited. I was building a bridge, plank by plank, letter by letter, until he could feel my presence no matter what. By the time the night drew to a close, I was drained. My hands sore from writing and arranging, my mind a whirlwind of strategy and imagination. But as I set down my pen and looked out at the quiet street, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had acted. I had moved, and most importantly, I had reminded myself, and perhaps him, that some bonds are unbreakable. I whispered to the darkened house, to the empty room, to the memory of his laughter that still rang in my ears. No one can take him from me. Not his father, not circumstance, not time. I'll be there, always. And for the first time in weeks, I believed it with every fiber of my being. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, streaking golden lines across the floor of my living room. I sat at the edge of the couch, coffee in hand, staring at the quiet street outside. The world was moving forward, oblivious to my internal struggle, and yet I felt an unusual calm. Over the past week, every small action, every carefully planned gesture toward my grandson had begun to feel like a lifeline. I was no longer simply waiting. I was actively reclaiming my place in his life. And with that reclamation came a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I pulled my notebook toward me, flipping through the pages filled with lists, drawings, and small sketches. Each page was a record of intention, a roadmap for how I would make my presence felt, without overstepping boundaries. I had left letters, small toys, and even a short video reading a story. I had imagined his reaction to each one, the surprise in his eyes, the way his laughter would echo in his small room, the soft whisper of recognition as he felt the love I had for him. I clutched the notebook tightly, feeling the paper press against my palm like a tether connecting me to him. I knew I had to go further, to escalate carefully, not in confrontation, but in presence. I couldn't just send objects and videos anymore. He needed to feel me in subtle ways, tangible ways that reminded him that even when I wasn't there physically, I was still his papa. I decided I would start leaving little things where he would find them. Small reminders of our bond. A superhero sticker on his bedroom door. A tiny note tucked inside his backpack. A drawing slipped under the front door. Each act was deliberate, quiet, almost invisible to the adults around him, but visible to him, if only he noticed. After a long sip of coffee, I gathered the items I had prepared the night before. There was a small notebook with a cartoon cover, a miniature truck, and a set of crayons. I also wrote a new letter, carefully choosing every word. Dear buddy, I hope you like these. I'm thinking of you and can't wait until we can play together. Love, Papa. I read it aloud, letting the words roll over my tongue, feeling the weight of each syllable. The act of writing and speaking the words anchored me, gave me a sense of control that had been missing since the message from my son. I left the house and walked down the quiet street toward my grandson's neighborhood. The air was crisp with the scent of autumn leaves, and the faint rustle of trees in the morning breeze seemed to mirror my own restless energy. I stayed on the edges, careful not to intrude, careful not to draw attention to myself. I watched him riding his bike, helmet slightly crooked, legs pumping furiously, laughter spilling into the air like a melody. My chest ached at the sight, a mix of longing and resolve tightening around my heart. I found a discreet place to leave the package, just outside the front door, careful to make it seem like an ordinary delivery. I pressed the small notebook into his hands mentally, imagining him opening it, running his fingers over the pages, feeling the presence of his grandfather even in the absence of a hug. I left the toy truck and crayons beside it, picturing the way he would arrange them, play with them, and perhaps, just perhaps, think of me. As I walked away, I felt a surge of hope and fear tangled together. What if he didn't notice? What if my son intercepted the gesture, interpreting it as interference? What if it pushed him further away? I couldn't control those possibilities. I could only act, with care, with love, and with patience. And patience, I realized, had become my most powerful weapon. Back home, I sat on the porch, the cool morning air brushing against my skin, carrying the faint aroma of freshly cut grass from the nearby yards. I closed my eyes and imagined him discovering the package. I imagined his small hands brushing over my handwriting, his eyes lighting up, the spark of recognition igniting a connection that no one could sever. I let myself linger in that mental image, allowing the warmth of hope to fill the hollow ache that had dominated my chest for days. Hours passed slowly, and I busied myself with ordinary tasks around the house, anything to keep my mind from spiraling into worry. Laundry, dishes, a quick walk around the block. Each act of normalcy was punctuated by moments of anticipation, glances at my phone, a constant awareness that today, something might change. And when evening came, I found myself sitting on the porch once more, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of purple and orange. The world outside seemed alive, children playing in yards, dogs barking in the distance, neighbors talking over fences, and yet I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had acted. I had reclaimed a measure of agency in a situation that had left me feeling powerless. I had reached out in ways that were subtle, careful, and deliberate. I had planted seeds of connection, and now all I could do was wait for them to grow. Late that night, I sat at my desk, writing down more ideas for the days ahead. I imagined reading stories to him over video calls, leaving small surprises in places he frequented, and sending letters that would speak directly to him. I imagined the bond between us strengthening, becoming a constant in his life, something that no message or exclusion could erase. My hands were sore from writing, my eyes tired, but my heart felt alive, pulsing with determination. Before bed, I whispered into the quiet house, "No one can take you from me, buddy. Not your father, not circumstances, not time. I'll be there, always." And in the stillness of the night, I allowed myself to believe it, not as a wish, but as a promise that guided every step I took, every small act I planned, and every ounce of energy I poured into the silent, invisible bridge I was building between me and my grandson. The darkness outside was no longer oppressive. It was a canvas, waiting for me to leave traces of my presence, traces of love, traces of a bond that refused to be broken. And as I finally drifted to sleep, I felt, for the first time in a long while, a flicker of certainty. The fight was far from over, but I was ready to move, ready to reach, ready to reclaim my place in the life of the little boy who was, and always would be, my grandson. The following morning, I woke to the smell of damp grass and the soft hum of the neighborhood coming to life. Birds were chirping, leaves rustled in the wind, and somewhere down the street, a dog barked. I brewed my coffee, savoring the bitterness, letting the warmth seep into my chest, trying to steady the mix of anticipation and anxiety that had been my constant companion for days. The package I had left for my grandson the day before weighed on my mind, and I couldn't stop thinking about whether he had noticed it, whether it had sparked even the tiniest flicker of recognition. After a quick breakfast, I grabbed my notebook and sat on the porch. I reviewed my plan, refining the subtle steps I would take next. I wrote down everything, detailing which small gestures could reinforce the bond without drawing unwanted attention from my son. I was careful not to cross lines that weren't mine to cross, but I was determined to be present in every possible way, even if it was invisible to anyone but my grandson. I decided to take a walk toward the park where he often played. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves mixed with the faint tang of asphalt warmed by the morning sun. I stayed at a distance, careful not to be noticed, observing him riding his bike with reckless abandon. His helmet was slightly crooked, his hair tangling in the wind, and the laughter spilling from him was like a knife cutting through my chest and stitching it back together at the same time. I longed to call out to him, to wave, to let him know I was there, but I restrained myself. This wasn't about visibility. It was about subtle presence. I watched as he fell once, his small body hitting the pavement with a thud. My heart leapt, panic twisting my stomach, but he quickly got back up, brushing dirt off his knees and continuing to ride. I realized then that this boy had inherited resilience, a stubbornness to keep moving even after falling. I felt a swell of pride and connection. It reminded me why I couldn't give up. He deserved my presence, my guidance, and my love, regardless of what boundaries had been imposed by others. I left the park and walked through the streets, imagining ways to insert myself into his daily life without overstepping. I considered small surprises at his school, tiny notes tucked into his backpack by a trusted adult, short videos I could send showing him how to build a toy truck or draw a superhero. Each idea carried both hope and anxiety. Would it be enough? Would he notice? Would he remember me? I let myself sit with the uncertainty, realizing that this patience, this careful persistence, was the only path forward. Returning home, I prepared another letter, this one longer, filled with small stories of my own childhood, tales I hoped he would find amusing or inspiring. I wrote about a time I had built a treehouse with my brother, how we had fought over who got the top level, and how we had laughed until we couldn't breathe. I wanted him to feel my history, my presence, my love threaded through these stories. I imagined him reading it, eyes widening, a smile forming, the invisible connection deepening. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch again, sipping water and watching the sun move across the sky. I could hear children playing down the street, parents calling after them, the rhythmic clatter of bicycle wheels on pavement. Somewhere in that ordinary symphony, I imagined my grandson's laugh. I clutched the notebook to my chest, whispering softly, "I'm here, always." The words felt like a prayer, a promise, and a tether anchoring me to him. As evening fell, I began to prepare a small surprise for him, a handmade superhero mask, a tiny emblem I had drawn myself. It wasn't much, but it was tangible, a piece of me he could hold, a symbol of the bond we shared. I wrapped it carefully, tucking a short note inside. "For my little hero, love, Papa." The act of creating something for him, of putting thought and love into every detail, grounded me in a way that nothing else had in weeks. Late that night, I sat at my desk, reviewing the week's progress, feeling both exhaustion and determination. I had left small tokens of my presence, sent videos, written letters, and imagined countless scenarios of his discovery and delight. The work was quiet, invisible, and yet it was alive. I knew it wouldn't be instantaneous. Change never was, but I also knew that persistence, patience, and love could build bridges stronger than any obstacle. I paused to look out the window. The neighborhood bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, shadows stretching long and soft. I thought about the distance between me and my grandson, not just physical, but emotional, imposed by choices beyond my control. And yet I refused to feel defeated. Every small gesture, every note, every imagined laugh was a step toward reclaiming my place in his life. I was building a presence that could not be erased, a connection that would endure. Before bed, I whispered into the quiet house, my voice barely audible. "I'll get there, buddy. I promise. I'll find a way to make you feel me, to know I'm here, no matter what." The words hung in the air, heavy with love, heavy with resolve. And as I finally lay down, exhaustion pressing against me like a weight, I felt a flicker of hope ignite. This was only the beginning. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges, but I was ready. Every day, every action, every small gesture brought me closer to him. And I would not stop until he knew, beyond doubt, that his papa would never abandon him. The morning came slowly, the sky pale and overcast, the air carrying a faint chill that hinted at the approach of winter. I brewed coffee, the rich, bitter aroma filling the kitchen and anchoring me to the present. The house was quiet, the silence punctuated only by the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the floorboards. I held my cup in both hands, staring out the window at the street below, my mind already racing ahead to the day's plans. For the past week I had been executing my small gestures, carefully crafted to reach my grandson without crossing boundaries. Letters, packages, videos, tiny notes, each one a thread, weaving an invisible connection between us. I had watched him from a distance at the park, imagining his hands touching the objects I left behind, imagining his laughter echoing in my ears. And now I felt a pressing need to escalate, to create something more tangible, something that could bridge the growing gap without causing conflict. I pulled out my notebook and began sketching ideas. A small scavenger hunt, with clues hidden around the yard and the park, leading him to a final gift I had prepared. A series of short story recordings, each one sent at intervals, telling a continuous tale of adventure and heroism, starring him as the protagonist. Even the smallest things, like leaving a superhero sticker on the door he always opened, were part of the strategy. Each action was deliberate, each designed to make him feel seen, loved, and connected. By mid-morning, I gathered the materials I needed: colored pencils, small toys, paper, and a hand-drawn map for the scavenger hunt, all carefully packed into a discreet bag. The neighborhood was waking up, the sound of children's bicycles clattering against pavement, dogs barking, and neighbors calling greetings floated on the crisp air. I stayed in the shadows, careful not to draw attention as I made my way toward the park. From a distance, I watched him arrive, his small figure pedaling furiously, hair tangling in the wind, helmet slightly askew. His laughter cut through the air like sunlight breaking through clouds, and my chest ached with longing and pride. I wanted to run to him, to scoop him up and hold him, but I restrained myself. This wasn't about immediate gratification. It was about planting seeds of connection that would grow quietly, resiliently over time. I began setting up the scavenger hunt, hiding small objects in places I knew he frequented. Under the swings, behind the slide, near the sandbox. Each object had a note attached, written in simple language he could read. "Look for me where the sun touches first," or "I'm hiding where your laughter echoes loudest." I imagined the thrill of discovery lighting up his face, his small hands brushing over my words, and it filled me with warmth I hadn't felt in weeks. As I finished placing the last clue, I stepped back, hands on my hips, and observed the scene. Children played around me, parents chatting, a dog barking, the rhythmic clatter of a baseball being hit. I took a deep breath, feeling the crisp air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself, "This is for him. Every little step, every quiet gesture, it's all for him." I lingered nearby, careful not to be seen, watching as he approached the first clue. I held my breath, heart pounding. He bent down, picked it up, and read the note aloud to himself, the cadence of his voice familiar and comforting. My chest swelled with emotion, a mix of relief, pride, and something deeper, a profound love that refused to be contained. I watched as he followed the trail piece by piece, each discovery a quiet affirmation of my presence in his life. Hours passed in that delicate tension, me hidden, him discovering, the world around us alive and indifferent. And yet in those moments, I felt an intimate closeness that no message or exclusion could erase. I imagined the memories he would carry with him, The thrill of finding a hidden treasure, the excitement of seeing my handwriting, the joy of connecting with his papa in a way that was playful, subtle, and undeniably ours. Returning home, I was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but alive in a way that only comes from having acted with intention. I spread out the remaining letters and small objects on my desk, reviewing them, imagining his reactions, planning the next steps. I knew this was only the beginning. Each small gesture was a foothold, a bridge, a thread that would keep us connected despite the barriers imposed by others. As dusk fell, I sat on the porch, the sky painted in deep purples and golds, the first stars beginning to emerge. The neighborhood had quieted, the children inside, the dogs asleep, the faint hum of streetlights flickering on. I closed my eyes and imagined him reading my letters, discovering my small gifts, feeling the quiet but steady presence of his papa in ways no one else could erase. The intensity of the past week weighed on me, but it had transformed. The ache of rejection had shifted into determination, the sting of absence into purpose. I realized that even without my son's blessing, I could create moments that mattered. I could craft experiences, memories, and feelings that belonged only to him and me. Invisible threads tying us together in a way that was unbreakable. I whispered into the night, "No one can take this from us. Not your father, not circumstance, not time. I'm here, and I always will be." The words were heavy with love, weighty with promise, and as I finally went inside, I felt a sense of accomplishment, however quiet and hidden it might seem to the outside world. Before sleep, I drafted more letters, thought through future surprises, and imagined his reactions. The planning, the creativity, the quiet strategy, it had become my mission, my focus, my lifeline. And as I finally lay down, the house silent around me, I knew one thing clearly. The path ahead would be long, challenging, and uncertain. But I was ready. I was relentless. And my grandson would feel my presence, no matter what. The morning arrived heavy with fog, the kind that muffles sound and softens edges, making the world feel suspended between moments. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in my hands, staring blankly at the street outside. The world was waking up, children running for school buses, neighbors talking over fences, dogs barking at leaves caught in the wind. But for me, time felt slower, stretched thin with anticipation, and a deep, simmering anxiety. I thought of my grandson, imagining him tucked in bed just hours before, the last traces of sleep in his hair, the faint weight of a blanket pressing against him. I wished I could see him, hold him, hear him laugh, but that wish was tempered by the knowledge that I had to act carefully, quietly, strategically. I opened my notebook and began reviewing the week's efforts. Letters had been sent, packages left, small toys and drawings hidden in his world like secret keys only he could find. I replayed in my mind his expressions at the park, the way he bent over to pick up my hidden notes, the slight sparkle in his eyes as he discovered my little surprises. Those glimpses, fleeting and distant, were all I had for now, but they fueled an obsession within me, a need to be there, fully, to reclaim my place as his papa in ways no one could deny. I wrote down new ideas, each more elaborate than the last. A series of scavenger hunts leading to a treasure I had built myself, a small wooden chest filled with little toys, handwritten letters, and trinkets designed to make him laugh. A recorded story series, each installment sent every morning, chronicling the adventures of a little hero who looked remarkably like him. Small notes hidden along the sidewalks near the park, each containing a riddle, a joke, or a drawing. Each act was calculated, careful, a quiet intrusion of love into his life. I imagined the thrill on his face with each discovery, the subtle reassurance that his papa had never left. By late morning, I gathered my materials and slipped into the neighborhood, careful to remain unseen. The fog muted sound, wrapping the streets in a quiet blanket that allowed me to move almost invisibly. I set up the first part of the scavenger hunt, placing the clues in locations I knew he would frequent. The swing set, the sandbox, under a bench near the slide. Each clue was written in my handwriting, simple but playful, designed to spark curiosity. I imagined him running from clue to clue, eyes wide with delight, giggling at each little joke or riddle I had crafted. From a distance, I watched him arrive, riding his bike with unrestrained joy, helmet slightly crooked, hair tangled in the wind. His laughter cut through the fog, sharp and pure, a sound that drove pain and longing through my chest, but also anchored me, reminded me why I couldn't give up. He fell once, his small body hitting the pavement, and I held my breath, heart hammering. But he got up, dusted himself off, and continued, resilient and determined. That resilience mirrored my own, a quiet echo of stubbornness and love that connected us across the barriers others had imposed. I lingered nearby, careful not to be seen, watching as he discovered the first clue. He bent over, picked it up, and read it aloud, his voice carrying the excitement and curiosity of a child unburdened by adult conflicts. My chest swelled with a mix of pride, relief, and hope. Each step he took along the trail was a small victory, a confirmation that my presence, however invisible, was still being felt. After the scavenger hunt, I retreated, careful not to draw attention. My legs ached from standing and walking, my hands sore from arranging and crafting, but my heart thrummed with satisfaction. I had acted, I had moved, I had created a space for him to feel me, to know I existed, without violating boundaries or provoking resistance. Every gesture was deliberate, quiet, and yet profoundly meaningful. Back at home, I spread out the remaining letters and small toys on my desk, planning the next phase. I wrote another story installment, imagining him listening, eyes wide with wonder, completely immersed in the tale. I considered including little drawings, small visual cues that linked the story directly to his experiences, so he could feel the connection, subtle but undeniable. Each detail mattered, each act mattered. Evening came, bringing with it a chill and the faint scent of smoke from nearby chimneys. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a thick sweater, watching the fog shift and curl around the streetlights. The neighborhood had quieted, the children indoors, the dogs asleep. I let my mind wander, imagining my grandson discovering the package I had hidden earlier, imagining his small hands brushing against my handwriting, his eyes lighting up with recognition and delight. I allowed myself to feel the warmth of that connection, even in the absence of physical contact. The intensity of my longing was tempered by a steady determination. I realized that love, patience, and persistence were my only weapons, and I wielded them deliberately. Every letter, every hidden toy, every story recording was a step forward, a way to rebuild the bond that had been tested by exclusion and circumstance. I understood that progress might be slow, fragile even, but it was real, and it was mine to shape. Late into the night, I sat at my desk, drafting new letters, imagining small surprises for him, and planning the next week. I reflected on the week's successes, the scavenger hunt, the video stories, the small gifts he had discovered. Each moment was a victory, a reminder that exclusion could not erase the bond we shared. I felt the weight of responsibility, yes, but also the exhilaration of purpose, the satisfaction of acting with love and intention. I whispered into the quiet house, my voice barely audible. "I'll be there, buddy. No one can take this from us. Not your father, not time, not circumstance. I'm here, and I always will be." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise, saturated with love. I felt the connection pulsing through me, fragile but unbroken, and I allowed myself a brief moment of peace, knowing that each action I took brought me closer to him. As I finally lay down to sleep, exhaustion pressing against me like a physical weight, I reflected on the journey so far. It had been painful, lonely, and frustrating, but it had also been transformative. I had learned patience, strategy, and the power of subtlety. I had discovered that love, even when constrained by barriers, could find its way, carving paths through silence, absence, and rejection. And I knew, with a clarity that burned through every fiber of my being, that I would not stop. The path ahead would be long, uncertain, and fraught with challenges, but I was ready. Each day, each gesture, each act of quiet love was a step toward reclaiming my place in my grandson's life. And one day soon, I would see the recognition in his eyes, hear the delight in his voice, and know, beyond a shadow of doubt, that he understood. His papa had never left. The next morning, I woke before the sun, the room still dark except for the faint glow of streetlights outside my window. The quiet was heavy, almost oppressive, but I had grown accustomed to it. My mind was already racing, thinking of my grandson, imagining him waking up, rubbing his eyes, stretching, and beginning his day completely unaware of the small surprises I had left in his world. I brewed coffee, the rich, bitter aroma filling the kitchen and grounding me, giving me the focus I needed. Each sip was a small ritual, a moment of preparation before the day's work began. I reviewed my notebook, filled with sketches, lists, and letters, every plan meticulously detailed. The scavenger hunt had been a success in my mind, even if I hadn't seen him discover the final treasure. That anticipation, the unknown, was both thrilling and agonizing. I knew he had found the first few clues because of the way he had paused, bent over, read the notes aloud in the park, his laughter cutting through the fog. But beyond that, the rest was imagination, speculation, hope, and hope, I realized, was the force that kept me moving. By mid-morning, I gathered supplies for the next set of gestures. Small drawings, a new letter, a miniature toy car, and a superhero mask I had carefully crafted. Each item was packed with intention, each note written with love and subtle guidance. I read the letter aloud before leaving the house, feeling the weight of each word. For my little hero, never forget that your papa is always with you. I hope you like these surprises. Love, Papa. Wait, saying the words out loud made them real, tangible, as if speaking them into the universe could ensure they reached him somehow. I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, carrying the bag of items. The neighborhood was alive, children heading to school, parents calling after them, dogs barking at the rustling leaves. I walked carefully, keeping to the shadows, avoiding anyone who might notice me. My goal was not to confront or force interaction, but to create moments he could discover, small proofs of my presence in his life. Every step felt purposeful, a silent assertion that I would not be erased. I reached the park, the air thick with the faint scent of wet earth and decaying leaves. I watched him arrive on his bike, helmet slightly crooked, hair tousled, legs pumping furiously. His laughter pierced the quiet morning, a sound that struck my chest with equal parts ache and joy. I wanted to call out, to run to him, to scoop him up in my arms, but I restrained myself. Patience, subtlety, persistence. That was the only path forward. I could not risk jeopardizing the fragile thread I was weaving between us. I began hiding the small items I had brought, under the slide, behind the swings, tucked into a hollow in the tree near the sandbox. Each item had a note attached, playful, simple, designed to spark curiosity. "I'm hiding where your laughter echoes loudest," one read. "Look for me where the sun kisses the ground first," read another. I imagined him following the clues, feeling a thrill at each discovery, his small hands brushing over my handwriting, his eyes lighting up with recognition. These invisible threads were my lifeline, the way I could reach him without permission, without confrontation. As the morning wore on, I observed him from a distance. He discovered the first clue, bent over to pick it up, read it aloud to himself, and giggled. My chest swelled, pride and longing colliding in a knot that tightened and released with every movement of his small body. He continued along the trail, curiosity guiding him, and for a brief, shining moment, I felt as though we were together, even if separated by distance, by circumstance, by the choices of adults who couldn't see what truly mattered. After ensuring that everything was in place, I retreated to a nearby bench, hidden by trees, and watched him navigate the scavenger hunt. His movements were careful but eager, his expression alive with the joy of discovery. I felt a quiet, intense connection, an invisible tether pulling us together. Every small act, every deliberate placement of a note or toy was a proof of presence, a silent assertion of love that no one could negate. Hours passed, and the fog began to lift, replaced by the soft warmth of the morning sun. I walked home slowly, every step heavy with anticipation and reflection. Back in the quiet of my living room, I reviewed the week's efforts and planned the next series of gestures. More letters, new small surprises, perhaps even a recorded video telling a story in which he was the hero. Each act was designed to create a continuous thread of connection, a web of presence that no exclusion could sever. By evening, I was sitting on the porch, the air cool and scented with smoke from distant chimneys, leaves rustling in the trees. The neighborhood had quieted, children indoors, dogs asleep, the faint hum of streetlights flickering on. I allowed myself to close my eyes and imagine him discovering the package, reading the notes, playing with the toys. I pictured the joy lighting up his small face, the spark of recognition, the laughter bouncing through the empty space where I longed to be. Each imagined moment was fuel, fire to drive me forward. I reflected on how far I had come since the message from my son. The initial shock and pain had evolved into strategy, patience, and determination. Each day was an exercise in subtlety and persistence, each gesture a way to assert that I existed, that I loved, and that I would not be erased. I realized that love, when deliberate, when patient, could carve pathways through silence, absence, and rejection. Late into the night, I sat at my desk, drafting new letters, sketching small gifts, and imagining scenarios in which he would recognize my presence without interference or conflict. I felt the weight of responsibility, but it was accompanied by a deep, burning satisfaction. Each step forward, no matter how small, was a victory. Every letter, every hidden toy, every story recorded was a deliberate act of love and connection, proof that I refused to let circumstances dictate our bond. Before bed, I whispered into the quiet house, my voice almost lost to the stillness. "I'll be there, buddy. No one can take this from us. Not your father, not circumstance, not time. I'm here, and I always will be." The words lingered in the air, heavy with promise, saturated with love and resolve. I lay down, exhaustion pressing against me, but a flicker of hope burned bright. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but I was ready. Every day, every act of patience and subtlety brought me closer to him. As sleep claimed me, I carried the image of him discovering the hidden gifts, reading my letters, feeling the invisible presence of his papa. The world outside continued, indifferent, unaware of the quiet battle being waged. But I knew, deep in my bones, that my persistence would not be denied. He would feel me, he would recognize me, and no message, no exclusion, no barrier would ever erase the bond we shared. The morning dawned crisp and golden, sunlight streaming through the blinds and painting the walls of my living room in long, warm streaks. I sat at the edge of the couch, coffee in hand, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation, fear, and hope thrumming in my chest. Today felt different. I couldn't explain why, only that there was a subtle shift in the air, a tension that whispered possibility. The week of careful planning, of small gestures and invisible threads of connection, had led to this day. And now, as I looked out at the quiet street, I knew that everything I had done, every letter, every hidden toy, every video recording, every tiny note, had brought me closer to the moment I had been waiting for. I opened my notebook, reviewing my plans one last time. The scavenger hunts, the letters, the small gifts, they were all part of a larger story, a story of presence, love, and persistence. I had imagined him discovering each one, watching the flicker of recognition light up his face, hearing the delighted laugh that confirmed our bond had survived the distance, the exclusion, and the pain. Each small success had fueled the next, each act building toward a moment when he would know, without a doubt, that his papa had never left him. By mid-morning, I gathered the items I had prepared for the final gesture. A small wooden chest filled with miniature toys, letters, and trinkets. A hand-drawn map leading him to it. A superhero mask I had painstakingly crafted. And a few small drawings I had made just for him. Each item was infused with intention. Each note written with care. Each object chosen to spark curiosity, joy, and recognition. I felt a quiet surge of determination as I packed them, knowing that this act, more than any before it, would bridge the invisible gap between us. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air. The neighborhood bathed in the soft glow of sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. Children ran past on bicycles, parents called after them. Dogs barked, leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. I moved carefully, deliberately, keeping to the shadows, avoiding anyone who might notice. My goal was not to intrude, but to create a series of moments that my grandson could discover, proving that his papa was there, present, and unwavering. I reached the park, my heart pounding as I set up the final scavenger hunt. I placed the wooden chest under a large oak tree near the sandbox, tucked the map in a small envelope under the bench, and scattered the letters along the path in ways that would lead him naturally toward the treasure. Each placement was deliberate, a calculated step designed to draw him through a sequence of discovery that would feel magical, personal, and undeniably connected to me. I imagined him following the trail, eyes wide, heart racing, laughter bubbling up uncontrollably as he uncovered each clue, and finally the chest. I retreated to a hidden spot, my chest tight with tension, and watched. From a distance I saw him arrive, helmet slightly crooked, hair tousled, riding his bike with unrestrained joy. His laughter echoed through the fog of morning, a sound so piercingly familiar it brought tears to my eyes. He dismounted, hopping off his bike with unsteady excitement, and began to follow the trail. My stomach lurched with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Each step he took toward the hidden treasures felt like a victory, a confirmation that my careful, patient strategy had succeeded. I watched him discover the first letter, his small hands brushing over my handwriting, his eyes scanning the words with curiosity. He giggled, turning the note over and reading it again. I felt a swell of pride and relief, tears stinging my eyes, as I realized that, in this moment, my presence was tangible, undeniable. He continued along the trail, discovering each note, each small toy, each drawing, and finally, he reached the wooden chest. He opened it slowly, eyes wide with wonder, and I imagined the joy that must have coursed through him as he saw the collection of gifts, letters, and tokens of love I had painstakingly prepared. He pulled out the small toys, examined the drawings, and picked up the letters, his expression lighting up as he realized that all of this had been for him. My heart ached and soared at the same time. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to hear him call my name, but I stayed hidden. This was his discovery, his triumph, his magical moment, completely unmediated, completely his own. As he played with the toys and read the letters, I allowed myself to breathe for the first time in days. The invisible thread I had been weaving had held, and now it was alive in the world, tangible, undeniable. I whispered softly to myself, tears streaming down my cheeks. "You see me now, buddy. You feel me now. I've never left." I stayed in the shadows for a while longer, watching him explore, imagining the joy, the wonder, and the sense of connection blossoming in his heart. I felt a quiet triumph, the kind that comes not from confrontation or victory over another person, but from the knowledge that love, persistence, and patience had succeeded where distance and exclusion had failed. The bond between us had endured, and now it was stronger than ever. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, I made my way home slowly, savoring every moment, every detail, every imagined expression of delight on his face. Back in my living room, I spread out the remaining letters and small drawings, reflecting on the journey. The week of careful planning, strategic persistence, and subtle, deliberate gestures had culminated in this success. I had acted with patience, creativity, and unwavering love, and it had paid off. The connection between me and my grandson was alive, tangible, and unbreakable. Evening fell, painting the sky in streaks of orange, purple, and gold. I sat on the porch, sipping a glass of water, watching the neighborhood quiet down. Children were indoors, parents settling into their evening routines, and the faint hum of streetlights filled the air. I closed my eyes and allowed myself to imagine my grandson lying in bed that night, surrounded by the small treasures, letters, and toys I had left for him. I imagined him reading the notes, touching the gifts, feeling my presence even in my physical absence. And in that moment, I felt complete. The journey had been long, painful, and fraught with uncertainty. The initial rejection had struck deep, leaving a hollow ache in my chest. But through strategy, patience, and relentless persistence, I had reclaimed my place in my grandson's life. I had shown him, subtly and undeniably, that his papa had never left, that my love was unwavering, and that our bond was unbreakable. Late that night, I sat at my desk, drafting more letters and imagining future small surprises, already planning the next steps in nurturing our connection. I whispered into the quiet house, "I'm here, buddy. Always. No one can take this from us." And in that moment, I felt a profound peace settle over me. The struggle was far from over, but the victory of today, the magic, the discovery, the bond reignited, was ours, undeniable and eternal. As sleep claimed me, I held on to that image of him discovering the chest, reading the letters, touching the toys, and smiling. I knew that tomorrow, the next day, and every day after, I would continue to build on this foundation, nurturing our bond with care, love, and patience. The journey had begun, and this was just the first of many victories, each one quietly monumental, each one a testament to the resilience of love and the power of presence.